like to welcome you to this General Government Committee meeting. It is August 3rd at 6 p.m. And could we have a roll call?
Councilmember Dennehy,
Here.
Schmisher,
Here.
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Tracy, absent, Worthington, absent, Mayor Pro Tem Hammer,
Here.
Mayor Smith, absent.
And this evening, we're talking about fence regulations, and then we'll move on to 2A streets discussion and priorities. And so Ryan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, we're gonna start with the fence regulations and residential fence height. This is before city council because of committed to taking a look at this, and we had a citizen that came in with concerns specifically around deer, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn this over to Patrick to talk about some of the research that we have done and sorry, just working on the computer here and share the screen. Go ahead and turn it over to Patrick and go from there.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. We are here to have a discussion on residential fence height regulations, and I believe Ryan did do a very good job of sort of giving you the context for why we're here having this conversation. So a little bit of background first. There we go. The concept that unites both fence height regulations and zoning is, quote, access to light and air as a form of a municipality's police powers for public health, safety, and welfare. This was part of the 1926 Supreme Court decision, Euclid versus Ambler, which established zoning as a valid expression of a regulation cities can in fact control. Now, for the concept of access to light and air, you can also translate that to mean access to view corridors. Okay? This is why fence standards incorporated the concept of human scale under this concept. A 6-foot fence tends to be consistent with average adult height and provides adequate privacy without obstructing views. The maximum height limits is that Canyon City employs at 6 feet has been written into Canyon City's zoning code concerning residential fences since the city adopted zoning regulations decades ago. Now, the image you're seeing here shows a standard 6-foot tall fence. You can see that although the fence provides backyard privacy, it does not obstruct the views behind. This is what adding an additional 2 feet in height to this fence would in fact look like. Okay. This is the textbook definition of something that the code came into play when fencing regulations were being created in the first place. This is called spite fencing. It is the main reason height limits were imposed on fence regulations in the first place. And while it does add privacy to backyards and would certainly discourage deer from being able to get into the backyards, the trade-off is that it provides a loss of view for the neighboring property. Now, it has been observed that when these kinds of higher fences are enacted and then taken down, they tend to lead to neighbor upon neighbor conflicts over the fact that one neighbor's view has been compromised as a result of this. So you say, what happens if we use a type of fence on the top 2 feet that's a bit more permeable? Well, chain link would be such an option. In staff's opinion, this gives the property the same look and feel as a prison compound. Now imagine this becoming the standard for residential neighborhoods all over Canyon City. It would begin to ruin the attractiveness of the neighborhoods. Worse, The height limit for residential fences, if the height limit for residential fences is modified and council does not like what it yields to whole neighborhoods on an aesthetic level, you're never going to be able to fully undo those regulations. So here's some concluding thoughts from staff on this. First, staff believes that tampering with fence height regulations in residential areas makes for bad policy. Staff's research has found that there are only 2 communities in Colorado where a 6-foot fence height can be exceeded. One is Alma, Colorado, population 296, where an 8-foot fence height is permitted. And if I'm not mistaken, Alma is also the town on the road going up to or back from Breckenridge that posts a speed limit of 17 miles per hour on a state highway in order to fleece unsuspecting out-of-towners. The second is Severance, Colorado, population 7,883, where 8-foot fences can be permitted by variance where the property is located along an arterial or collector classification roadway, principally for sound deadening, not for wildlife management. If council changes the maximum fence height to exceed 6 feet in height, and I want to make sure you're understanding, this is a change that your staff adamantly opposes. But if you do that, and you do not like how this changes the neighborhoods, and we think that's going to be a very likely occurrence, changing the ordinance back will not repair the damage. Anyone who obtained a fence permit for the higher standard will be grandfathered in even after the fence height is changed back. To use an aphorism, you are never going to be able to fully put that genie back in the bottle. And that the motivation to change the fence height has to do with keeping deer out of backyards, which is a wildlife management issue. Changing the fence heights is only treating a symptom of the problem, not the actual problem. And it's the actual problem that we need to address. I think Ryan has had some conversations with.
Yeah, so. Are you done with?
I am
the
done,
presentation
yes.
and the share your. So I have had conversations with our wildlife management CPW representative. We were supposed to have a meeting yesterday, which has been rescheduled. Looking later in the month of August for having that meeting with the district manager. The CPW is also of the opinion, at least our local wildlife management folks, that the deer problem is an issue and it is becoming a danger. So, you know, I think, you know, having more discussions with CPW and coming up with something that is a wildlife management solution makes more sense than actually changing the height of the fence limitations and ask for more time to actually have those sit down meetings with CPW to you know, hear from them and discuss some of those potential solutions. It's my understanding there is a new district manager and has a more open mind towards some of these wildlife management programs that we have talked about in the past, but have never been able to implement because of previous management or philosophies within CPW.
So I'm not sure that it would be permitted, you know, having managed several impoundments. A lot of times the issues that can come with managing impoundments are migratory waterfowl, which are protected by international treaty. And in those cases, what the federal government and state governments have done is allowed hazing of the waterfowl to keep them from potentially using the impoundments. And I'm not sure, I'm not really up on Colorado wildlife regulations. Is there, maybe when you talk with our wildlife managers, ask them about would it be possible for citizens to employ hazing techniques? Now, how that was carried out in terms of waterfowl is you essentially have this like a little flare pistol that would shoot either screamers or bangers, you know? Yeah, it was, which are a lot of fun around the 4th of July too, by the way. But those techniques were permitted. The one technique that would not be appropriate for any type of residential setting were propane cannons, big propane, loud propane, oh my goodness. But so maybe ask about hazing techniques and see if there's something that we might be able to do. Those types of devices are relatively cheap. They're not very expensive.
Well, they did say paintball guns were permissible, the
Well,
paintball guns.
Yes and no. Paintball guns are illegal within the county, they're illegal within the city. And I know this because I've worked on this wildlife program with that.
They-
And the problem with what you're saying, and I know they do that with waterfowl like
Yeah.
crazy. But if I haze it at my house, the deer's gonna go flying off and go into somebody else's yard, and then you just,
yeah.
everybody in town and over the next week have a. I mean, it would sound
Yeah.
impressive in town, but that's all it would do, and. You know, the numbers need to be reduced, and I agree, we don't have to have total high fences and. You know, I know that one person came to the council and when you drive down and look at his fence. I mean, drive down Baldwin, look at his fence, you can barely see it. I mean, you can see his post. And believe me, if it was an ugly, bad fence, because I actually called him my neighbor. When he put up an 8-foot fence. I mean, the guy's moved since. But I'm the one who called the city and said, hey, because it did look terrible, I agree with that. But the fence that this other neighbor put up, it is so see-through that it's transparent.
What construction?
He's just doing
Barbed wire?
no, he's using a T-post and just a small, what is it, 1x3, 1.5x3 welded wire. Yep. And it looks, you know, you don't even notice it, because otherwise, when I saw it going up, I'm like, holy moly, boy, you know, here we go again. But once it was up, I'm like. But, and I get it, there's types of fences, you know, it's it even goes back to the lady that lived on South 12th Street who took the fence down. That fence was a beautiful fence out front. You know, it wasn't, even though it was higher than what was allowed out front, it was a beautiful fence. You could see the house, everything was crystal clear, you could see everything. So, but she was trying to keep the deer out. And unless you live, you know, I've got electric fence around my garden and all that right now, but I've had them go after my dog and. You know, now, can you shoot a paintball? No. It is not legal. Do people?
Mhm, yeah.
My neighbors do on their property.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, the herd is getting bigger. And
Sarah County.
my husband he's done a lot of research on it himself. He's a hunter. And he's concerned that there's so many and they're looking, you can see their ribs. This is not a healthy herd. And when when the herd gets bigger and it's not healthy and even if most of the herd is healthy, when the bigger the herd gets, the more stragglers. And then you're gonna get mountain lions.
Well, I don't think that we need to like raise the fence, lower it. I think for right now, you know, and it's just a tough call because even though that we're saying we're gonna work with the Division of Wildlife, I think everybody knows who's ever worked with the Division of Wildlife. That's a tough thing to get, and I think anybody who knows, who's done work with them. And I've done a lot of work, even when I was in Blackhawk and that. They're not the easiest people to get stuff passed through, especially in today's environment, it's even gonna be harder. When, you know, because there's still so many people in town who, I love it here.
On the subject of hazing, part of my research and putting this together, I came across a story about a farmer in Missouri who was having deer problems. And so he began experimenting with these motion sensors that he would put on the fences around his farm that would shoot water from this irrigation system to frighten the deer away.
Like I said, but you know, and then they would probably work fantastic. But here, they just run to the neighbor's next house.
Right.
And, you know, that's one of the concerns that we also have, with, the fence heights as well. You may prevent it from one house, but then you're funneling it to just the next,
Yep,
the next one down the line.
Another topic with no answer. Site,
It's government.
yeah.
So, we do plan on having another additional meetings with CPW. It does sound like locally the appetite for doing something is changing, so. We'll continue down that path.
Is there any, and I see Amy's got her hand up. And I'll get you in just a second, Amy, but is there any, the opacity of the fence makes a big difference on the site view corridor. So is there any, virtue in having different heights for different opacity fences? So things that are 80% opacity, can have a higher.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Than other more traditional fences.
Yeah, I think, we can do some more research on that. I think, fence materials and quality of neighborhood, those become considerations depending on how far down that path you go.
From my own, and Amy, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much, Mayor Pro Tem. I just had a question about the research, and thanks so much, Patrick, Ryan. Really appreciate all of the investigation and the time that you've put into looking into it. I am curious, do all of the municipalities in Colorado actually have fencing regulations? It surprises me that, and I guess my question is, so Alma and Severance are the only ones that specifically say that you can have higher than 6 feet, but I guess I'm curious as to if all municipalities actually have fence regulations, and if there are actually quite a few that just don't touch on this subject.
Well, I would have to go and check some of the municipalities on the Eastern Plains, but as far as Denver area, Fort Collins area, Colorado Springs area, Pueblo, mountain communities, Western Slope communities, yes, they all, municipalities do. Counties tend to be a bit more lax about this because you're generally dealing with much lower densities, but municipalities do, yes, in residential areas.
You did a lot of research using Unicode and looking for fence regulations, specifically height limitations. There were a lot of regulations that came back specifically for the municipalities. Whether or not somebody doesn't have a regulation, I don't know how we would research that. I know Patrick specifically reached out to the city planner listserv, which goes out to probably just about every municipality asking about height limitations within Colorado. We may be able to ask if anybody doesn't have any fence regulations through that same listserv.
No, okay. It was more of a matter of curiosity. And also to point out that I would highly suspect that there are more than 2 municipalities where you are not allowed to have higher than a 6-foot fence. It may just be that it's a question of municipalities being silent on the subject as opposed to explicitly permitting higher than 6 foot. I'm also, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the municipalities that I found that had regulations, is specifically a 6-foot limit. It was harder to find anything different than the 6-foot limit.
Sure. And then also if you're doing keyword searches, it's obviously a lot harder to find it if it doesn't exist than if it does.
Correct.
And then also just wanted to chime in support of the further conversation about opacity levels. And obviously, as Councilmember Dennehy pointed out, there are other options other than chain link aesthetic view corridors and things like that. Thanks.
So along those lines, it doesn't necessarily have to be an opacity limit, but we could actually specify materials of construction, sort of like welded wire, something like that if we wanted to try and accommodate some of the people that are having problems with. deer.
Yeah, correct. And then, you know, there may be concerns from a CPW standpoint, depending on fence materials as well. We did find some additional documentation from National Wildlife or National Parks as well as CPW with some pretty gruesome photos based off of fence materials and animals getting caught in them.
The ability to stick a leg through and then you've got a real mess.
Correct.
Right. On the hazing issue, I would not be too concerned. It would seem to me, that if you're trying to use a hazing technique to encourage an animal to leave an area, that if there's enough people employing those techniques, eventually the animal's gonna get the message and go where there are no hazing techniques.
Nah. No, because we haze the heck out of them in our neighborhood,
Mhm.
and they're so used to people.
Kids chase them all the time.
Yeah, they just look at you like, what?
But like I
Yeah.
said, we're just getting so many. and
Yeah, we
like I
have a
said,
pile of rocks, we throw
Yeah.
at them.
I do think that is an issue that we have, is that the deer population that we have is so used to the human element that it's
That's domesticated.
lost.
Yeah.
They are.
Lost their fear.
Well, and the one thing too is like this time of year, when they have little ones and if there's little kids around. If that little kid's walking his dog, I mean, that doe is gonna protect, like I said, they put down 100-pound Chesapeake in my field with my kid back there, that's why. I apologize to Zach for my wife going off that, but. One of these days, it's gonna happen to a kid in town. It's gonna happen.
So we'll continue our discussions
Okay.
and, but, we committed to council that we'd do some initial research and bring something quickly, and this is where we're at right now.
Fencing.
Okay. And so then I guess that concludes our discussion on fencing. I don't see any hands up, so let's move on to 2A. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Gonna have to do a lot of toggling.
We'll start with what we got, I guess.
Yep. So good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Kim Swearingen, Public Works Director, here to talk to you about 2A priorities and have a discussion. Most of this presentation is going to be mostly about discussion. We'll go ahead and have a little bit of an agenda. Ryan, to the next slide, please. So those discussion topics are the current street priorities as I presented them to you last year at about this same time. The proposed street priorities based upon our OCI index as well as my staff recommendations. Then the street maintenance strategy that Tony has currently and anything that we can update that on. And then, of course, the cost of water infrastructure, which has been a topic in the past and what we have kind of discussed that we need to put some money towards that water infrastructure before we can actually prioritize some 2A. So if you go to that original map, please. That's the one with the pie chart,
Pie chart, not that one.
not that one. That one. So this is our original OCI map back before 2A was voted on and ratified by the people. You can see a significant amount of red, which means the OCI is of 0 or a failing road. The green, of course, is roads that were at a good or better OCI. You can see a lot of downtown is red, Old Canyon is red, and some of the eastern part of Canyon is red, as well as Fremont Drive and everything down in Dawson. All right, and you can see there's kind of a percentage down there in that pie chart. I don't exactly, obviously the failed roads were at 67%. satisfactory to excellent was 25%, and then we had the fair to Midland in the middle. I think I reported last year that we had increased the failed to poor up to 25% better, but we were still, because of the way that OCI was declining, it was still at the 66%. So you can go back to the PowerPoint. And then we're on to the next page. So this is the current street priorities. You can see by the slash throughs that those are the ones that we have completed in the last couple of years. We still have Harding, which is also got a water line, and that's why it was pushed up to this year and not done in the last couple of years. You can see that we had Reynolds, Pear, Field, College, Pear again, and then Franklin Avenue. The first two, Reynolds, Pear, Field, and then Pear again, are all kind of one project. It started at Highway 50, went up Reynolds Avenue, down Pear, up Field, and then also it continued on Pear. So we decided to do that as a full project because it made contiguous sense to do it all as one project. And therefore we went to design. We are currently in the middle of design of Reynolds and Pear. We have most of Reynolds designed. We are still kind of quibbling a little bit about what exactly we want to see on it, because there is quite a bit of curb and gutter. There is irrigation lines that have to be considered because we are expanding the footprint of Reynolds Avenue. So we have to determine how much we're going to spend on that irrigation to make the curb and gutter work. Pear Street is in the middle of design. We have what we call scroll plots, right? Did we decide it was scroll? Scroll or roll plots. Basically, the engineer has come to us and said, this is what we see. Can you please provide some feedback? That's probably at about the 60% level. And we're still working on, some changes for that. Field, of course, is another extension up north that would completely finish that particular, street in regards to 2A. College is kind of on the back burner. We're not working on that one because we've been talking about the crossing of College because it has a water line crossing underneath the irrigation ditch. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to do the water crossing plus possibly doing the irrigation crossing. So there are some things that we're still trying to work on for that before we can actually put it on 2A. And then Franklin is on the back burner. The next 5 items were currently slated for 2023, but you'll see on the next slide that we've kind of rearranged some things. We have kind of squashed some of 22 and 23 together since we're not going to quite get to Reynolds this year because of the water line issue. We decided to use ARPA funds, $1 million worth of ARPA funds to take care of that water line. And so it's been a little bit slower in getting that out to bid because it needs to go out first before we can do Reynolds. So that kind of squished all the 23 stuff up and the 22 stuff together because it will likely get done next year. Thankfully, the College and the Franklin are kind of short. So we could get those designed pretty quickly. And Harding is actually already designed.
Just to go back to the ARPA funds, as I mentioned in the urban renewal meeting, and just to put it on record in this meeting, ARPA funds have federal guidelines, regulations that we have to meet, follow. It's not the same standard bid documents that we put out. So we're having legal review those before we put those out. Because we want to make sure that we are absolutely 100% compliant because we don't want anybody to come back and try and claw back that money later. We do have to go through a little bit more stringent process to use those ARPA funds for the water.
You said Franklin was on hold?
No, it's just we're just not to it yet.
Okay.
In regards to the list. In addition to what Ryan is talking about, we're used to CDOT managing all that process for us. So this is kind of new because we're directly getting funding from the state and from the federal government. This is our new list based on our conversations for the past month, based on the OCIs that I was provided this past month from our GIS department. So we've kind of taken some of those things off and we've replaced them with what we believe strategically was more important. So some of those previous streets were considered local roads, whereas we know that we need to get the most bang for our buck, so we're going to back to the collectors and arterials. So 9th Street Central and Griffin are all in that collector or above category. So we added those to the list. And we were supported by the OCI. I know that Councilwoman Schmisher had some questions about that last year, that we had some OCIs who were in the 58s. So we pretty much removed those, but went down back to the strategy of the failing streets that are arterials and collectors. So we added those to the list for 2024. We also have kind of a strategy that we would like to discuss with you in regards to some of the south side roads that have kind of been neglected, as well as how we're going to tackle Old Canyon City. So Griffin, Myrtle, Sherman that you see in 2024, the reason we put those on the list, number one, obviously they are OCIs of zeros, but they're on the south side, which means that we can actually do a different form of reconstruction. We can do what's called FDR, and I fail to remember what the FDR stands for.
Full depth reclamation.
Okay, thank you. And so that means that we won't have to, we would be able to basically mill and combine all at the same time. And then we would be able to overlay on top of it. It is a very quick process, especially when we're dealing with the semi-good materials of the south side. Nothing is ever good in the south side, but it's better than the north side. So those would be quick and easy projects, kind of low hanging fruit when it comes to the OCIs. The next ones in 2025, Riverview, Cottonwood, Fowler, Elizabeth. A few of those are again on the south side, so that we can kind of take care of those. And then Elizabeth, which is on the northeast side. Similar, when we're talking about, when we talk about strategy to do some of the stuff downtown, is trying to do those roads as FDR roads instead of the full reconstruction.
Kim,
Yes.
Amy had her hand up.
Okay.
You still have a question, Amy?
Yes, thanks so much, Mayor. And thank you, Kim. Really appreciate the work that's clearly gone into this and the reprioritization to include more collectors and arterials. I've got two quick questions, hopefully. So just to make sure I'm getting this correctly, is this the entirety of what we expect 2A to be able to fund? Like this is it?
So funding, of course, depends on how much, we collect per year. Right now, it is looking like, so this is always a moving target. Right now, it looks like we can fully fund Reynolds, Pear, and Field. But of course, that would change should the bids come in higher than we anticipate. That is with our current funding this year and what we have left in the account. So those are very substantial roads with a lot of curb and gutter and a lot of change in the section. So we did have that broken down into phases should the prices come in too high. So when it comes to Reynolds, we had the phase line ending just past the ditch. And then we would continue on. I think that's right. Is that right, Tim? Or did we do it around Pear, the corner of Pear? I thought it was,
No, it's the corner.
is it the
It's
corner?
the corner.
Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, we would phase it to the corner and then we would take care of the next, which would be Field, and then continue down Pear. So it's kind of that. This is a rolling document. It is like a living document. It's not something that we're married to, but as prices come in, then we can make more determinations for this. This is what we call a capital improvement plan. So it's not fully funded, but as 2A money comes available, then we move the next ones up on the list. I hope that answered your question.
Almost. So, but this is, we obviously have projections for what we expect 2A funding to be. Do we expect, based on current projections, to be able to complete these projects and nothing more? Like this is what 2A we expect. I understand prices may come in differently and 2A funding may come in differently, but is this kind of what our projection is?
For the year or for the initial term of
I think she's saying the
10
term.
years?
For the 10 years, yeah.
For the 10 years?
The 10 years is up in 27, correct?
Yeah,
And we started in 17.
Yeah,
so
in 27. So there's always room. I mean, this only goes to 25, so 2027. I mean, we could get to that point. But like I said, it is really hard to tell. I mean, this is our best case scenario, yes.
Okay, so we expect to be able to add in 2 more years of 2A for 2026 and 2027. Like what you're showing here is what you're hoping to be able to fund each year with current 2A projections. My second question is, I think that there are still a lot more arterials and collectors that need work that are, failed on the OCI index. So I'm really surprised. I understand that FDR is easier and cheaper, but I'm really surprised that in, half of 2024 and all of 2025, we're only focusing on local roads and that we're not looking at collectors and arterials and things where a lot of people are traveling on them, especially when we have so many collectors and arterials still failed.
Go ahead, sorry.
Talking a little bit more about that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Ted, I think, has something to say, but just real quick, we do have, some of those roads are in the maintenance side of things. Tony currently is working on Orchard when it comes to replacing concrete panels and that kind of stuff. So it's not just 2A, it's a many folded program where we have some that are not quite there to being, fully reconstructed, but can be, some places be replaced and have it bring the OCI up. So there are those, those ones that, we're working on from the maintenance side as opposed to the complete reconstruction side. And so you had something else to say?
I just was gonna add that picking the roads, finding a road that needs repaired that everybody drives on is not hard. I mean, it's very obvious when you drive around, but it's more complex than that because of the utilities in the ground. I mean, we have the water department in-house, but water line is insanely expensive this year. And so if the water main's been in there since the 40s or the 50s and they haven't, either they haven't done anything to it or they know they have problems when they have a repair or two a year in one stretch. We don't want to go spend $3 million putting new asphalt on top of it just to have the water main blow up before we're done. That carries to sanitation district. They have the same issue. Atmos, Black Hills. I mean, we prioritize based on what we think we can get done within the city's budget, but also with working with, I guess, quasi-governmental entities and other utilities. So it gets pretty complex pretty quick. And they obviously have the same problem we have. They don't have enough money to do everything they want to do. So.
So, and I've heard a couple things, just for history purposes. One was, the water department can't catch up with the 2A funds. So that's slowing things down because their budget is slower. And also that 2A was designed for streets that we cannot budget in a year, correct? Am I saying that right? Like the larger projects.
Yeah, 2A was designed to, replace streets that have failed. Those are the OCIs of 0 or failing streets.
We're trying to get the most bang for the buck by doing these large parcels over the small little.
Yeah, and there's a science and an art to some of this. Obviously we have the streets that have water main in them, and we have to coordinate with on every street. We have to coordinate with the other utilities as well. Sometimes when we're looking at some of these projects, we try to bring some of these streets up that already have water line that's been replaced, or not every street has water line in it. There may be opportunities to bring some of those streets forward to allow the water fund to catch up and replenish itself. The other aspect, and we talk about this every year, is there are water projects and priorities that are outside of the city limits, but still within the water district.
Right.
That we have to, replace some of those water lines as well. And, not everything can be spent within the city limits when it comes to water.
And I just wanted to mainly put that on record because I do have a lot of questions on a daily basis how streets are vetted. So I'm trying to just get that information.
And we can go, let's go ahead and go to the next map that I had GIS create. It is, okay, so this shows the streets that we have done. So you can see there's a lot more green in the map. You can see, you know, down in the major collectors and arterials in Dawson as well. So there's a lot of green going on. So this is the stuff that we have completed since 2017. And you'll see the bubbles that are calling out. Those are the bubbles that we anticipate, you know, grabbing those in the next few years. So the brown ones are the ones that are currently on the list for this year and for next year. The two that we have currently designed or have completed this year. And then the purple is the ones that we have on the list. The dots that you see, the blue dots, and I didn't know this until I looked at it more closely today in preparation for this meeting, those are water department priorities. So you can see where they have water department priorities that don't have anything to do with our street restoration. So they have to take a lot of that into consideration as well. So Ryan, if you would scroll down a bit and we can go to the right where the list is of the water projects. So this is, you know, the map, and then it shows a corresponding number to all of those distribution projects that they have on their list that they have to think about. And this is, of course, based upon leaks, it's based upon pressures, it's based upon age. I mean, they have a similar way of determining replacement that we do in the roads department. So they have these various conditions. So this being on their list and not quite matching up with 2A shows us that there's a lot of money that we're gonna need to, not just in the streets department, but in the water fund too. So when water comes and asks you for a rate increase, this is what they're looking at. They're looking at their CIP. And it just doesn't go hand in hand with the 2A. It's stuff that they're gonna need. It's pump stations, it's tank repairs, it's all that stuff. So
Undersized water lines.
yeah. And so I can send you both of these maps so that you can have a look at them. But we can go ahead and go back to the presentation.
Before we do.
Sure.
I think, you know, there is a metric that might help the answer Councilmember Schmisser's question. And that is to, because it's easy to do the OCI, looking at the surface of the street. But what may be helpful is a combined OCI that might also look at the age of the infrastructure, a particular infrastructure underneath the street with, you know, so if you had brand new sewer and you had brand new stormwater, but your water line is 100 years old, you would give that, you know, a failing OCI, but so maybe like a combined OCI to give some structure to, because OCI is, like we're saying, is only part of the picture. And that might be helpful as we go forward to think about if there's some slick way to do that or something, you know.
Yeah, and so the water department is going to do a water master plan. It doesn't just talk about development, it talks about, you know, the whole the whole system as a piece, as opposed to, you know, just kind of piecemealing it around. So hopefully they're going to do that pretty soon in the future. That would give us a better idea of what goals they need to target. I mean, right now, this list is just something that they see every day. These are the ones that are on the list that it's kind of a wish list. Whereas, you know, that master plan will give them a path forward in what needs to be done as far as criticality. And that way, when their critical infrastructure, you know, plan coincides with our critical infrastructure when it comes to streets, then we can kind of do what you're talking about, that married OCI.
When we did this originally, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, we did take that into consideration. So we have a list of which streets still have 4-inch water mains, which water department wants to get rid of. There was leaks. We had a bunch of criteria on how that upper third of the list came to be prioritized. And the big push was arterials and collectors, because that's where the bulk of the people travel, and they are in not the greatest shape for sure. I mean, when you only have 2 or 3 vehicles in a residential neighborhood versus thousands of vehicles up 9th Street in a day, pretty apparent where the money needs to go. The other big issue is stormwater. We all know we have lots of drainage issues around town that are not easily fixed. And so it is, like Ryan said, it's been a dance of what we can get done and past administrations and past councils have had. We've adjusted this list based on their wish, and then something comes up in the community like a new school and then there's an opportunity for the city, and the school district is a great example to combine forces and take care of, do some cost sharing on some infrastructure. And so those priorities, as long as we're out ahead of them enough, we've adjusted and kind of moved around. So Kim's right, it's a kind of living document, and it's not set in stone. And as we dig into things, we learn more and find out that, well, that wasn't a great plan. We didn't realize that we needed to do this in such a hurry. So,
And Ted brings up a good point of rearranging based upon the needs of the community and things that become apparent. We're currently doing this. We did not have this stretch of Main Street from RGB to 4th Street on the list. I mean, that was kind of a low priority for us, but now we have 3 grants. We have the bump out grant, we have the Complete Streets grant, and we have the clock tower grant. So that basically moved Main up the list because we wanted to be able to do all of that project together, but that's going to take some of 2A funds. Because we're gonna have some curb and gutter repair, we're gonna have some sidewalk expansion, and so we're gonna have to redo the road. So I mean, trying to get these all to marry together brought that up on the priority list, even though it wasn't on the priority list before.
Right, but you're getting a multiplier on your $2
Right.
because of it.
Mhm.
Is there a way that we could like publish this, whether it be via newspaper or maybe a
We were,
We
tab
publish-
on our website?
We
or-
have it
Yeah,
on the website. There's an entire page. We have a standalone page for 2A on the Facebook page.
I just need a resource that I can refer people to when they ask these priority questions, because I can't remember this,
Mhm,
like.
for
hard-
sure. Mhm.
Yeah, we put it in multiple places, and there's an entire section in the budget related to this. There's, as I mentioned, the Facebook page, the website. We publish these on a regular basis, and I know Christy Gotham, our public information officer, does a lot of that because we get a lot of questions about 2A and where these dollars are going.
Thank
And-
you.
And we were talking about, Ryan brought up to me today that there was one Facebook page or website page that we have to update. It's actually got some very old information on it. So we're going to be doing that. I will be doing that in the next couple of days. So if you go to the next slide in the presentation. So we're going to talk about maintenance. So our current maintenance strategy is the budgeting of crack seal and chip sealing roads. Those are those roads that we're talking about that aren't completely failing. And using the budget for small rehab of concrete streets. And then there, of course, are the fair to good ratings. This year, we actually did not have any roads that warranted chip seal or crack seal. We had exhausted our list in that way. So I gave Tony direction to go ahead and start working on the concrete streets. So what we have talked about is possibly taking that budget he's been using for crack seal and chip seal roads is to address those concrete streets on the north side, not just in the way of just his crew, because his crew is small, they can only do so much, but actually doing it in the way of projects. So we would take a couple $100,000 of that from the maintenance budget and put it towards more concrete roads that we could see some scope, savings, because we're
Yeah.
doing it as a bulk as opposed to, one panel at a time. Tony would still be using half of his maintenance budget to go out and do those single panels or those, curb and gutter, or whatever it is that he needs to repair for that. But we were, talking about maybe we should just, instead of just crack seal, chip seal, putting that money towards the concrete streets, since we need to keep moving on that.
How many concrete streets do we have? Besides 19th and Franklin?
15.
15th, Orchard.
Barrett. Dewey, up North
Dewey.
Canyon toward Reynolds or Villa Lane,
Okay,
part of that's concrete.
Meadows now. Concrete.
Yeah, Meadows.
And taking care of those roads is substantial. That's rigid pavement is far more labor intensive than an asphalt road. So it takes a significant amount of money and expertise to take care of it. It's not something you just get the paving machine out and you roll a few inches of pavement.
Can you talk a little bit about why we have asphalt and why we have concrete?
So, what we.
Also the concrete.
Sure. So I mean, asphalt is apparent why we have asphalt, but in the north side of Canyon City, we have clay soils. And so now we're using asphalt in North Canyon because we have found a way to mitigate that clay soil condition by using particular base materials and geofabric and some other various, and more technologically savvy things that we can use so that we can take advantage of the fact that we can use a cheaper asphalt as opposed to concrete. But that was why we used the rigid pavement in concrete, because it didn't flex as much, because clay soil will expand and contract based upon moisture and material. So that was heaving basically our streets. And it's a little easier for, us to take out a concrete panel when it's heaving, replace it, than to replace the entire street.
Is that how you get that like bubble effect
Yes,
that some streets have where it kind of bubbles?
there's
real
lots of
soft?
reasons, but that's probably one of them, yes.
Okay,
You'll see it on the north end, the 15th, before you get to the ditch, where one panel will be
right.
about that much higher.
I actually had a question on Franklin, because I'm guessing that the one that's on the list is that small parcel. It's like by Claflin Eye,
Mhm.
where Franklin over here on the corner of Park Lane has this huge section that floods every time it rains. And I don't know if that's a panel issue or if it's a stormwater issue.
It's a panel and a curb and gutter and
Okay.
everything, and that's on my list for this year.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yep,
But it's
that's
gonna-
actually something we talked about not too long ago. We were talking about how to fix it.
It's gonna be a pretty extensive repair, because
So
it
while you're
it
there,
doesn't drain.
drive through Circle Drive.
I hear about that.
Oh, you're on the back burner there.
Do you want to add anything else about the maintenance strategy when it comes to chip seals or anything like that?
No, it's just our chip seal list. We plugged away at it and we did a real good job at it, but now we're to the point where the OCI, we're just not warranting doing that work. I mean, it might look pretty, but a year later, we're gonna be right back to the same mess.
So we started 2A and the preliminary work. The engineering department did some research, and so the strategy that we settled on was for maintenance is do the best first. Right? Don't go spend $1 million per mile on a new road and then never look at it again for the next 40 years. So we know we have roads that are beyond chip seal and crack seal. And just like Tony said, it's not gonna do any good to go
No.
put a Band-Aid on it. But we do have, now we're getting an inventory of roads that need maintenance, so we have a 5-year. Crack seals, that's our goal, is every 5 to 7 years, but our goal right now is every 5 years. Go crack seal these, and then every 10 years, we would do a chip seal. Give or take, but that's the goal, is to keep the maintenance up, and like Kim alluded to, Tony's guys are doing some repairs on Orchard and the concrete. But we know those streets have not, the joints haven't been sealed since they were installed 30 years ago, probably. So
So
once
just,
the panels are repaired, Tony and I and Kim have kind of discussed, maybe we put together a project. Where we have somebody come in and seal all those joints and just try to get another 20 or 30 years out of it.
just for history purposes, because we do have some new council members, is there like a specific reason that these roads were not looked into in the recent past, or was it a budgeting issue? Was it budgets needed to be utilized in different places other than road infrastructure? Like why are we in this position?
I mean, before 2A,
Yeah, before 2A,
yeah,
before 2A.
The history lesson before me.
I just think that's the nature of the beast, right?
Right.
You
It's
know,
in the
they tend to
past.
do the-
Well, we have to move
So,
on.
You know,
What's
what,
that?
It's kind of like, it was in the past and it was a mindset.
It-
And
It very much, and I like that word,
It
the
was a-
mindset.
right.
Historically, all over
Yeah.
the state, it has been like that. We're not the only community struggling like this. Colorado Springs passed an initiative. Pueblo West has tried to pass 2 initiatives. Pueblo is trying to pass initiatives. I mean, we're all trying to catch this up, and it was the fact that material costs outpaced budgets.
Okay,
And
that makes
if you-
sense.
Castle Rock is a great example before their boom. Their roads were like our roads. I don't remember Castle Rock before the big boom.
Yeah.
When everybody starts building and you've got this influx of money and developers, and it exploded.
Priorities.
Right,
But
we're growing, we're
the-
changing.
Yeah, the lesson too is that
Yeah.
you need to, we, the city needs to plan on spending money on maintenance, right? We're building trails and giving them to the Parks Department, but they don't have extra people. We've got all the roads that need maintenance, but obviously things are more expensive. Money doesn't go as far. We're having the same problem as everybody else, keeping people and getting people. So again, it's a dance, but
Okay, and I have a question for Kim and Ryan. You mentioned earlier about there's a place where you have issues with not only the water pipe underneath, but also the irrigation ditch. Are we leveraging the set aside funds that we have each year to help with the irrigation ditch where it goes under our streets?
And that's something that we were talking about. We were not utilizing that, and we've had several conversations about a couple that we have on the list.
I mean, it would help a little bit.
And that is
yeah.
what, the dance that we're all talking about is, that it's not always an easy solution to just go in and replace it. A couple of the ones that we've been talking about are in what we call a sump condition, which means that the elevation drops below the road and then comes back up. So that means it's kind of a maintenance nightmare for the ditch. So I mean, how do we design that? So we've been talking about how do we design, because we're going to be restricting flow if we take away that sump. So those are the various things that we have to think about when we go to replace it. And is it good enough? Is it in good enough condition so that it's going to last? I mean, there's of course, the one on College is okay. The one on Reynolds is okay, but are we going to we're going in place with head walls and stuff that's deteriorating. That way we don't have to do the entirety of it, but we will be doing some maintenance on it so that we can save the street on top. And then, of course, we're talking about new ways of putting in the water line, because there's going to be a water line under that ditch as well. So we're talking about doing horizontal directional drilling instead of the other methods that we've been using in the past. Make it cheaper, make it easier, make it faster. But we are trying to, we have that in mind, that $200,000 that we've been getting for the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, trying to budget and getting those in there. But now, when it comes to the ones that we really have to fix, we need to make sure that we roll that money over. So the $200,000 that's in there this year, if we don't ultimately use it because we've decided not to, because something needs a little bit more money, we'll roll that next year, and then we'll have 400,000. That way we can hit the ones that really need the work.
So we can do that with the budget. We don't
Yeah.
have to spend it within a certain.
Yeah.
time.
That has not been done in the past, and that's something that we're doing now going into the future.
Yeah, because that's like a time bomb.
It is,
That-
in some places it is,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the cost of water infrastructure, water priorities follow 2A, discuss old strategy for Old Canyon water mains and street recon. We've already touched on the water priorities versus 2A on that map. We had kind of a little powwow, and we talked about what is some ways that we could get the water department to replace some of those mains in Old Canyon downtown without killing them in regards to budget. Is to possibly budgeting a little bit every year, at least in materials. And allow the distribution crew, which they are willing and wanting to do, to go out and replace 2 or 3 blocks of water main per year. That wouldn't be too horribly expensive and too much of a burden on the department. That way, those minor local roads could be added to 2A the following years. That way, 2A is following water lines instead of the other way around. So it's just an idea we've kind of kicked around, and we wanted to get your guys' input to see if that's a worthy goal. I mean, since we're always talking about trying to get those downtown roads, because we know that you guys get questions all the time about how come you're not doing my neighborhood.
Right.
So that was our way of kind of balancing the 2 programs. We as the engineering department will still drive 2A based upon OCI and all the street indices and everything else. Whereas the water department would be driving the
They're on.
downtown Old Canyon replacements. And then we could start adding that to the 2A construction list.
I think that's a great plan. I wish we would have had a budget like that for stormwater.
Stormwater, the unfunded mandate. And we can go back to the map if you guys have any more questions. Like, that's the end of kind of my presentation discussion. If we have anything else you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, so on 2A, when 2A was enacted, we started collecting an additional 1% on our sales tax. And what we did, what council did at that time is said, okay, we want to front load this project. And so what we did, kind of interdepartmental loans. So it was all kind of within family, if you consider the city, the family, to be able to spend a lot of money to get going and show progress to the citizens, rather than just waiting for that 1% year by year to build up and be able to spend that. So overall, Ryan, do you have a sense, are the interdepartmental loans 8-year loans, 10-year loans, or?
It's a 10-year loan. It gets paid back a portion every year. So it is meant to last the life of what was approved by the voters.
And so what that means is if you look at the total amount of 2A money that we're gonna collect year by year, and realizing it doesn't stay even because the collections move up and down. But what that means is if we front end if we load up the front end, that means the back end expenditures fall off.
I believe it's an even distribution as far as the loan goes, the payback period goes.
But I'm talking about total money to spend in 2A, so that if we spend a bunch at the beginning, there's gonna be less to spend at the end.
Well, too, that's true to a point, because I mean, we don't spend every cent because it's, collected in arrears, yada, yada, yada. And we do, and that's what I think I talked about last year, is we do have extra money in the account. We have so much money budgeted, but we have a little bit more money in the account, due to interest or,
Increase.
banks, yeah, or that, because banks go out and they put their money out there, and then they gain, more bond issues or whatever it is that they get, and then you get that because you have your money in the bank. So some of that has been accumulated earnings from the money that we've been keeping in the bank. And so there's a little bit more than
So
what is budgeted.
Mayor Pro Tem, just to give you an idea, so 2021, we started with a beginning balance of about just under. At that same time, we had a debt service of just over, actually just under $678,000. So every year that debt service gets paid down a little bit.
Right.
Every year we see, especially over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in sales tax revenues, which is an increase. When we started 2A in 2017, we were bringing in roughly around $3.5 million a year for 2A, that 1% sales tax. Last year, we brought in right around 4 million. So we have seen an increase in that over time. So that does give us a little bit more cushion to build, more projects into the project.
And that's why, I mean, in the budget, you'll see, the budget says 3.5 million, because that's what our anticipated earnings are. And then, if we spend that 3.5 million, we still have that cushion that, we could do a couple more projects that year, should we need to.
I take that back. I maybe misspoke there. So the debt service, I think every year is 676. So I'll have to confirm that.
I saw it come from them.
So would it be possible to put together just a little bar chart that shows what we have spent year by year and project out to the end of 2A to the 10-year period, so that we could take a look at that and see how things are going. I mean,
That's a great idea.
we're halfway through right now, just about, and that might be a time to look at something like that.
And that would answer Councilwoman Schmisser's question as well, is how well does the list marry up to what it is that we're gonna have to spend up to twenty
Also, it
twenty-seven?
gives us a tool when the council has to go back to the voters for another 1%. They can show the compare and contrast.
And it looks like she has her hand up.
Yep, hey, yes, Amy.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, that would be fantastic. It would also be, I think, really helpful as you're putting together that bar chart to do I know it's really hard to project costs that many years in the future, but to do like the prioritization list far enough down to where like, this is what we're hoping we get to. We may not get all the way there, but this is what we're anticipating or hoping 2A will cover. I think that is something that would be really, really helpful as we're approaching the halfway mark on 2A. I also just wanted to underscore and thank Mayor Pro Tem for his idea about kind of a complete streets OCI plus CIP, I think it was. Because right now I'm still having a really hard time understanding how we got to the priorities that we got to for 24 and 25. When we have so many arterials and collectors that still need work that I think need to be prioritized. So hopefully having that more complete picture of the prioritization that takes into account water and sewer and all of the other utilities underground would help not only me, but I would imagine a lot of our residents better understand why we're picking the 2A streets that we are. So looking forward to both of those. Thank you so much.
And so maybe on that bar chart, Ryan, we'd have income, we'd have debt service, because and then we'd have projected expenditures or actual and up to date, and then projected into the future, something like that. And that would I think, and something simple like that would be a good tool.
For sure, and it would answer a lot of the questions that we get asked, I think.
You can ask them to print a
Yeah.
24 by 36, you can hang on your wall.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know like when we did the
The
Highway
first
50
shot.
corridor discussions, there were charts and graphs and stuff in the hallways for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe just to revisit, this is our progress, something in the daily record, or maybe it's something we talk about on Morning Line or whatever else. And, just to let the voters know, the progress that has been made with 2A, but not just 2A, but with street maintenance as a whole, I think would suffice some of the public a little bit better than just not knowing what's next on their list or when their street's coming up or.
Well, and that's the one thing that's tricky about putting out a list like that,
Right.
because it is a living document.
And
it changes.
Yeah.
Streets do move up and down the list.
Yeah.
We've mentioned a couple times, the halfway point, 2022 is actually year 6, so we're past the halfway.
Yeah.
And that's.
We did kind of lose a year though for.
COVID.
We're still up. We're still working. But that raises the question on timing for whether or not council wants to go back and re-up 2A and ask the citizens for that. And next year may be the year if we want to do that. I don't know.
So, giving us a little bit of ammunition will be really helpful, because we can, like Brandon says, we can start the discussion now in the different forums that we have available to us, and talking about, what we've done so far. Because it is, to me, it seems like a really good success story, the amount of green that we got up there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of streets that are a whole lot better.
I'm a marketing guy, so I like to brag about all the stuff that's been done, I like to throw it out there. And hey, everybody, pat us on the back. Look what's been done, and it's these guys here that are doing it. So thank you for all your hard work.
Go pat them on the back, would you?
I will.
Sure, that's
Okay.
it.
Anything else? If we have anything else then for us? Any other questions online or anything? It looks like we're at the end of our meeting, and thank you all very much for being here, and because this really is helpful for us. Thank you, and with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.